Guys, I feel a little outnumbered today. Mm-hmm. It's a little scary here because there's honor.
Yeah.
But then there's honor too. There's more honor.
That is so funny to me given how different we are.
I don't feel like we're that
We're
different.
not that different, but I don't think anyone in the world would call you Honor too.
I also don't think. I think that's the first time that anyone on Earth has done that.
And there's going to be a lot of other firsts in this episode of Podpodcastcast. Hello, and welcome to Podpodcastcast. It's a podcast where we talk about other podcasts. I'm Sam.
And I'm Honor.
Honor, I think that was a wonderful little musical bit you did.
Thanks.
Because it felt like a celebration. And I think today is a celebration.
Yeah.
It's a celebration of Patience. Hi, Patience. It's
Hi,
your
guys.
birthday today.
It's not. Thank you, Sam.
Oh, no.
You got it
This
wrong.
has been poorly arranged.
You biffed it.
Patience, there's a few important things about you.
Okay.
One, the most important. You made the show art for this show.
I have to come clean. I have to break the silence. Because if you'll remember, if you're a day one Podpodcastcast fan, you'll remember the early days where the show art was like a hand-drawn thing.
Yes.
And that was done by Honor.
This
And
is true.
then Honor came to me and was like, hey there, a business proposal. What if you like digitized it? Because I've done like little digital art before on my iPad.
Yes, you're an artist. You can draw.
Yes, a little bit. I dabble. And so I traced it and I colored it, but I did not actually draw the show art. So what I have to say is that these two have actually been lying to you
Yeah.
for weeks and months, saying
That's
that
true.
I did the show art when really I just traced it because Honor actually like drew that and designed it.
This is true
I did
because
draw
we
it.
list you in the show notes for every episode
Yeah.
as the person who made the art.
Yeah.
And we did that mostly because we hate telling the truth.
Yeah.
We want to deceive our audience.
Yeah.
Would you say that's
Famous deceivers here on Podpodcastcast.
the other important thing about you is that you are Honor's sister.
That's true.
And
Yeah.
we are here in Honor's childhood home.
No. Recent home.
Recent
Of
home.
like 7-8 years.
Yeah.
But there's no one childhood home for Honor.
Wow.
You're like
Just a person of the world.
tumbleweed.
A tumbleweed.
tumbleweed rolling
You're
down the
equally a
road.
tumbleweed.
No, I'm not. Don't call me a tumbleweed on the podcast.
That is an insult you would say to your sibling. You're a tumbleweed.
You're a tumbleweed. Well, I'm just saying we lived in the exact same number of childhood homes.
Okay, well, I don't know.
I don't know. I wasn't really present.
Yeah, I was a baby.
Yeah.
You were slightly younger.
So it's a little bit different from our usual recording setup. We're not in the studio, I've been in the studio some this summer. Honor's
I have been here.
You've been here. Now I've also come here because I was like, there's not enough pods.
There's not
I need to
enough.
discuss my pods with someone. And so you guys look very comfy. You're on the bed
Yeah.
with a giant bear.
Yes, we have Bjorn the bear, IKEA bear. Am I allowed to say like brand names on this podcast?
We'll bleep it
Yeah.
out, you know.
Okay.
We don't want to offend our other advertisers.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Do you want to stuff animals, Sam? You look kind of lonely over there.
I am a little lonely. Could
You
I
want
have
one?
one?
Yeah.
Is there one that I
Okay.
could grab easily?
We could have. Do you want the sheep?
I need this sheep. He looks pokey. I'll take him. I'll take this.
All right. There you go.
Now, listener, imagine me, but with a little sheep, little lamb tucked between my arms. I'm like a shepherd
does have
boy
a
in my
little lamb.
Hawaiian outfit today,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's true.
Yeah.
and that's accurate.
Yeah. I am wondering if anyone will have been able to put together that we are siblings before you said that we were siblings, because it took you a long time to get to that point. And it's rare that
Yeah.
you have someone named Honor and someone named Patience.
This is true. You guys both have. Well, I think Patience is a more common name.
I have
Yeah.
met other patients before. I've never met another honor.
Never
How does
met
it
an
feel
honor.
to actually be
the
one
best.
of a kind?
It's pretty awesome.
I like the best.
Yeah.
The best, I guess. Yeah. How does it feel to be the best by default?
It feels great.
I see. And I wouldn't know how that feels because I'm the best Sam by sheer cool factor.
Yeah. That didn't
it-
seem
it-
very
All
confident.
right, let's talk about our first pod.
All right.
So I'll go behind the curtain here. I'll expose a little bit of the artifice, a little inside baseball with the podcast. So I try to listen to maybe 10 episodes or so, whatever feels like a normal like introduction or even a completion of a podcast that I'm going to review. And so I'll either like binge a podcast over a week or listen to it over a couple of months. I did not do that for this podcast.
Good job.
This podcast, as of recording, has 2 episodes out and a trailer.
Okay.
And I was intrigued. The podcast I'm talking about today is Chrisley Confessions 2.0 with Todd and Julie Chrisley.
Whoa.
Now, some people will know who that is. I think it's going to take the rest of us a little time to catch up. I don't know that much about Todd and Julie. I've skimmed their Wikipedia page and I've listened to their podcast.
As one does.
Okay.
But I'll tell you what I do know. Todd Chrisley is the patriarch of the Chrisley family. Julie is his wife. They had a show, I don't know where, on the television for a while called Chrisley Knows Best. It was a reality TV show about them. It was really about them parenting. But the thing is that Todd is like, he's an eccentric guy. So it's supposed to be like their Christian parenting style, right? But it's more than that because Todd is like kind of crazy. So he's like this helicopter parent. He is like very eccentric and he's like very fashion minded, you know? So, and he's kind of catty. I can tell you that from what I hear on the podcast. You know, if he doesn't like someone's like outfit, he'll be like, they did not do that right, right?
That's awesome.
Okay.
It is awesome. Well, Todd and Julie Chrisley had this successful reality TV show for several years. I think they had like 10 seasons or something. This is not about Chrisley Knows Best. I hope I don't offend any Chrisley Knows Best fans. But then they got in some trouble. Todd and Julie Chrisley got convicted of tax fraud.
Oh.
And they went to prison in January of 2023.
Whoa.
Now, on Podpodcastcast, we don't really talk about politics, and I don't really want to talk about politics. But it's going to come and sneak in here a little bit. But I think it's interesting. So they're in separate prisons. They're in a men's and a women's prison. And they maintained the whole time that the tax fraud case was bogus. Like that they were innocent, right? And so Donald Trump has just come into the presidency. And shortly thereafter, I say shortly, in May, he grants them both a presidential pardon. So they quickly get out of prison before they were supposed to. Like Julie was supposed to get out in sometime in 2026, and then Todd was serving along. And so now, in July of 2025, they're recording a podcast. Now, this is the Chrisley Confessions 2.0. I think they had a previous podcast, but this might have, I don't know if the Chrisley Confessions was part of their TV show. I think it was a separate podcast. So now they've got a podcast only, and the first one they record is like 30 days after they get out of prison. And they're recording this podcast. And so they've got 2 episodes up, which are basically like, what has happened? Because they spent 28 months in prison. And it's I've never experienced anything like this. And I mean this so seriously. Like, so they both had this like kind of Southern accent, right? And I want to say they're both nice people. Like, okay, this is so strange. This is such a strange experience because podcasting is such like an intimate medium, you know? So I'm listening to these people talk, but I'm also, in the back of my head, I'm like, you probably did tax fraud. I mean, you were convicted of it.
Yeah.
But you know, but you say you never did it. Anyway, it's so crazy because it's so in the 2 episodes that come out, they're basically the same. They're very similar, in which they talk about what their time in prison was like. So they were in federal prison. So they were in the Bureau of Penitentiaries, I think. And they talk about like what their experience was like in prison, which is fascinating because there's the whole time this comparing and contrasting going on between Todd's experience and Julie's experience. Because Julie's like, yep, I was at Fort Lexington. You know, most people think it's like a medical facility. It's not. The men's is a medical facility, but the satellite women's camp is a work camp. And so she was like, so I was working the whole time, and that was good. Like, it was good to be in, she worked the commissary in the kitchen. She's like, and that was good. It kept me busy. And I needed that to like, just like stay sane. And, you know, and it was hard. We didn't have like a lot of amenities that you'd have on the outside. And Todd is like, yeah, well, most of the time I was eating Burger King and Chick-fil-A. And really, I have grown attached to Culver's. You know, we didn't usually have a... Yeah, I know. Isn't it crazy?
What?
I know. It's so fascinating because Julie's talking about like how hard she had it, and Todd is too, to be clear. But they're both being like, this was really hard, and like we didn't realize like prison life is a hard game. It's like, well, yeah, but it is also funny because Todd, like, to kind of give you a sense of what Todd's character is like.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Julie would be like, well, every day I did my laundry. And Todd was like, oh, I hired that out. I had a man do that for me.
Oh my gosh.
Like, and
wow.
yeah, and like Julie would be like, yeah, and I worked, 4 days a week in the commissary, and then if my friend Maddie needed help in the kitchen, I would go help her on the rest of the days. And then Todd is like, well, most of the time, or at the start, I was in the chapel. And that just meant I got to watch movies all the time, which is, it's crazy. Like, I want to, like, describe what this podcast is. Like, if there's a format.
Yeah.
Right? But there truly isn't. The podcast is really just, there's only 2 episodes. So the 2 episodes right now is just them talking about their time in prison, which is fascinating because it's a mix that I've, like, never heard before of, like, well, it's a mix of 2 things I have heard before. It's like one kind of like a normal like Christian mentality for things. So they'll talk about like I was going through a hard time, so I like prayed a lot, right? Mm-hmm. And this thing worked out really well, and it was like a blessing, right? And so there's kind of this like nomenclature and like this way of talking that like I'm familiar with, but it's mixed with this like other way of talking that I've also heard. Like not that it happens a lot, but there is a significant presence of like. You know how in, like rappers will talk about how they've gone to prison or how they've done stuff to like promote their cred?
Yeah.
Todd Chrisley being like, and we knew who were snitches and you just didn't associate with those people. I would never tell on another man.
Weird
like,
mix.
It's like so fascinating.
Yeah.
But
what?
It's like these 2 worlds have collided. You know what I mean? Almost like Christian influencer, I guess, is really what I want to say.
Yeah. That's a very specific vibe.
Yeah, and then like I do just like think of kind of hardcore rap almost, although they're not rapping or anything. Just the way that they're talking, like you had to protect like your other guys in there, know, and it's like, and that warden, man, she was no good. Like just like it's such a weird combo.
Yeah, that's wild.
Yeah, Sam, I want you to know I've been trying to think of ways to chime into what you're saying this whole time you've been talking, and I truly am coming up with nothing.
Well, because like, what else do you compare it to?
Yeah.
It's like if the Duggars from 21 Kids and Counting, like it came out and they were like, I killed a man.
For
and
sure,
it made
a
me
reference
hard,
I
you know
get.
What I mean?
Yeah, and
you don't. Wait, you
definitely a reference I understand for sure.
I also feel like, especially because, as you said, there's only 2 episodes, so it's like, where on earth is this going? Like when they run out of prison things to talk about, then what is this about to become?
That's I think you've like hit the nail on the head. Well, because okay, so there isn't much of a format. It's really just like Todd and Julie discussing. Mm-hmm. But most of it's just Todd and Julie discussing like what they've done in prison. And I say like on the second episode they've talked less about prison, but they're still mostly talking about it. Which is like it's a big event that they've gone through very recently.
Yeah.
But the one like thing that is a format that they have is at the end of the episode they want to like answer questions that people have posted them on social media or like that their followers are asking them. And it's also really interesting. So at the end of episode 2, Todd was saying, we don't owe anyone anything. People are worried about our financials. We're all clear. Now there are people who owe us some things and we will be coming after them.
What?
So maybe that's like where it goes. This
reminds me of Chicago, like the musical Chicago, not the city,
just the city of Chicago,
not the city Chicago. Let me clarify. Like,
you ever seen The Bean?
No,
exactly like that.
It reminds me of like Roxy Hart and Velma Kelly in some small way. I don't know. I can't quantify it, but
are they like a Bonnie and Clyde duo?
Well,
is that
the
I've not seen it.
of if for the theater kids, like the end in the last number when Velma and Roxy are like addressing the audience and their fans. I don't know. And it's obviously not. There are key differences, but I don't know. It gives me a similar vibe.
It reminds you of something.
Quite explain. Yeah.
It is really strange. I feel it's hard to compare to anything else because I've never had any perspective. But also when you think that they're going to be one-dimensional or just like caricatures, right? Because you almost expect, oh, these reality TV stars went to prison and so they're going to like be really entitled, which like kind of sounds like Todd was a little bit, but
yeah. When he's talking about Burger King, I'm like, okay, man. And you like Culver's best? That's what you wanted?
he's into Culver's now. Prison
You have a
got
preference?
him into Culver's, which I think is...
Yeah, that's awesome.
But it's not exactly like how you think that would be. Plus, when you think that they would just be one-dimensional, because they got like, you know, a lot of people have been leaving negative ratings on this podcast, and almost all of them cite that these people got pardoned.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, I'm kind of expecting this kind of be a political podcast in a little bit, and it is in some sense. They both talk about how they're Republicans. They both say, thank you, President Trump, for getting us out of prison, which is understandable. But it's also really interesting in that second episode, they talk about how it's important to like overcome the political divide and be friends with, you know, just be friends with people, and that politics isn't everything. And which is crazy. It's not a crazy thing to say. It's actually very normal and based thing to say, but it's crazy to hear that from Todd. It's just crazy to hear that from this like very sassy man.
Yeah.
Who is also like, my warden was terrible. She was very mean to me. And she wouldn't let me have hair dye or what. Like that wasn't an actual complaint, but it's just interesting that these like are real people, but they're also really strange people.
Yeah, that's wild. Okay, I have 2 questions.
Yeah.
One, is there only 2 episodes and a teaser because this podcast is extremely recent?
Yes.
And so there's hypothetically going to be more. I didn't know if the vibe was that, last episode came out 2 months ago.
No, like this is happening now because they got pardoned in May.
Yeah.
And then they release an episode in July.
Okay.
And they release another one. So like that's
gotcha. So
it is really recent, and that's how I found it, is because it was like,
that was going to be my next question, is how did you find this podcast to listen to?
It's no Conan O'Brien. Yeah, it's a little different. I don't know. I was going through like the top pod.
Okay.
And I was like, what is this one? Because it just is like man and wife on cover. And what really interested me was Chrisley Confessions 2.0. Yeah. And I think I was right to be interested by that.
I also think you were right to be interested by that.
Yeah.
Anytime there's a 2.0, I do wonder what happened to the first one.
What went down there? So this is kind of, I feel a little bit like I am reporting back from an expedition I had.
Yeah. How many pods from this expedition out of maybe a hypothetical 5?
You know what's crazy is I want to be like, this podcast is really bad, but it's not. Like, it's entertaining, but I don't think I'll ever listen to it again.
Yeah.
So if you liked these people before they went to prison, you'll probably continue to like them. So I'm glad that I could be the one to tell you about that.
Yeah.
If the politics of all this makes you feel weird and you don't like it, then yeah, this is like a 1 for you. I think because Todd, Julie is a very normal person. I need to emphasize that. Julie is, she might have a slightly big personality, but it's completely dwarfed by Todd.
Okay.
Anyway, so maybe if you like trashy reality TV,
yeah,
this might be for you. So I'm going to say I guffawed a few times while listening to this.
Nice.
Maybe a 3, maybe a 2.5, maybe a 3. I don't want to like it as much as I do.
Yeah.
Anyway, so
that's fair.
Something totally different.
Extremely.
Just like how different Honors Podcast is about to be.
Yeah.
Well,
isn't it, Honor? Isn't this one unique and different from the other ones you've talked about?
I don't know. It's not like the same, but I'm trying to decide how unique it is.
Okay.
I don't know.
Well, maybe you tell us what the podcast is.
Yeah, I'll tell you about this podcast, and you guys can tell me how unique you think it is. So, the podcast I listen to is called Under Pressure. This is an audio drama. So, we've talked about audio dramas before.
Yeah, so this is almost a return to form.
Yeah, it is kind of a return to form. And that was part of why, because this isn't necessarily like, oh, this is another D&D podcast or whatever. Yeah. But part of me is like, is this that unique, even though it doesn't have a premise of anything I've reviewed before? Because it feels very classically audio drama to me in a lot of ways. So, Under Pressure is a podcast so, first classical audio drama piece. It is the audio recorded notes that a person aboard, not a submarine, but an underwater base.
Okay. Patience
is raising her hand.
Patience, we call on you.
Is it like Wolf 359, but they went down instead of up?
A little bit.
I was going to say Subnautica for the gamers.
Yeah, that can be the intersection. So they're at an underwater station where sometimes submarines, it's kind of vague what the point of the station is.
Okay.
Submarines come in and out pretty frequently. You never really interface with any of the people who come in and out. They're unimportant. They just come for, like, checking in with research stations, or sometimes they're delivering things to the station, or fairly often they're getting medical treatment or something like that.
Patience, I feel like likening this to a space station was spot on.
Yeah, I absolutely was going to bring that up because I'm a person who really likes an ensemble podcast. And it's really easy to make an ensemble show. I say ensemble podcast. I like an ensemble anything where it's like these half a dozen people are stuck in close quarters with one another. Their personalities don't necessarily mesh because they're not all here because they're friends. They're all here for different miscellaneous reasons. What will happen when they're all stuck together? How's that gonna go down?
And that gets you every time. You're like, I do want to know.
And I'm like, I want to know. So, yeah, there's 6 people at this station. I don't even remember what the station is called.
How much of this have you listened to, by the way?
I've listened to all of it that exists.
Okay. How much is that?
That's 10 episodes. Each episode is about 20 minutes long.
Okay, so this
is really a Sam-sized podcast.
This is a Sam-sized podcast. It is not Wolf 359.
It is not Wolf 359. So, our protagonist is Jamie McMillan Barry, who
has the coolest name ever.
It's a very cool name. She also harps on a lot because people will call her either McMillan or Barry.
Yeah.
She's like, my last name is McMillan Barry, which does actually become plot relevant. So I was like, props to them, because sometimes they'll just make a little quirk for a character to like really harp on, and you're sometimes like, this is kind of getting annoying. It becomes relevant. But Jamie is stationed at this underwater base as like a humanities researcher. She's down there on a residency for kind of anthropological, philosophical writing.
What?
Yeah.
What?
There aren't humans underwater.
Well,
Take
yeah, at the
one,
space, at
idiot.
the, I almost said space station because it
Water
is so
station.
space station-y. The water station, the underwater station.
Do they call it? What do they refer to it by anything?
It's like the deep sea space station. They kind of just say down here a lot.
Got it.
They aren't really specific about a lot of it. But she's down there, and it is kind of clear that she's kind of like, I replied to this residency not really thinking it was going to be anything, and now I'm under the sea. I guess writing about the philosophy of what being down here does to people's minds when you're in this environment. Like, I'll come up with something to write about.
Huh.
And so she's...
Okay, but if you're showing up day one to do arts and they're like, all right, get in the can. Like, what?
Yeah.
Do you say, Like,
Is
that how hard it is to be, in the humanities these days?
Yeah. Yeah, she brings it up at some point. She's like, look, I just applied to a bunch of things, and if something tells me they'll pay me, not a lot of jobs are available for me with my literature degree.
Yeah.
So it's like, you know what, fair. She took the residency at the undersea station. So she's there, she's doing that. The rest of the crew is the Captain Phaedra of the station, who kind of runs interfacing with the submarines that come in and out, runs day-to-day activity, who does not get along with Sydney Peterson, who is the medical professional. This is a point that I'm confused about in the podcast, because there's a point at which Sydney very vehemently is like, I'm here to do medical research. I'm not like a pediatrician. I'm not a doctor in that sense. But then later talks about their oath and like having to go help people who are sick. But it's like, you were protesting that earlier. So what's up?
Yeah.
Might just be a discrepancy.
It feels like it sounds like one of those doctors at like a university hospital.
Yeah.
Like, gosh, let me research these dang cells. Stop being sick at.
Yeah. Kind of, at first I was really confused, and then I was like, I think they just don't want to be treating people for injuries. I think they want to be doing research, so they're like, my job is research, but actually their job is also to help people who break their legs.
Yeah. I like that genuine awe patience. You're like, that's sad when people break bones.
Yeah.
Aww.
Yeah. Be careful, guys, okay?
Would you like this sheep? He's helping me.
Oh, wait, I can get my... there's a second bear.
Oh, perfect.
Batten down the hatches.
Wow,
There's two
we have
bears.
so
There's
many
two
beautiful
stuffed
stuffed
bears.
animals.
Yeah, this is a really cozy podcast.
This is a cozy. This is
Cozy
much cozier
app.
than the studio.
Yeah. Then there's Mona Ramirez, who is one of the only nice people on the vessel.
Oh.
But she works in biology. She's looking at fish and stuff. She's always talking about the weird specimen that she's excited to be working on. And Jamie's like, that's kind of scary and frightening, but I'm glad you're excited. And then there's, I don't remember his name, but he's Irish.
Does he have a wristwatch?
Nope, bad joke.
Good joke. I laughed inside.
Well, Patience, thank you so much, because I was like, can you cut that out? It's a bad joke. I don't want that to be there. Sure. So, okay, we got these folks.
Yeah.
What are they doing?
Well, I was going to finish telling you about the cast. Irish guy is here. He's studying, like, geology type things, plate tectonics. They're at sort of the edge of a trench.
Gotcha.
So, they're there. And then there's kind of the engineer, fix-it guy, Jack, who is Australian and is voiced by Zach Valenti, which was a jump scare to me in the credits because he doesn't sound like Zach Valenti. I keep mixing up Jack and Zach, so if I mix it up, don't blame me.
And dear listeners, Zach Valenti is famously, for us, the voice of, what's his name?
Douglas Eiffel.
Doug Eiffel.
In Wolf 359. He also is a jump scare in truly a surprising amount of podcasts.
Yeah, he's
a voice actor who is
good.
in a lot of things. He was in, what was that barbecue podcast?
Mars's Best Brisket.
Mars's Best Brisket.
You ain't gonna wanna miss it.
Yeah, jump scare there. He's in a lot of things.
Wait, who was he?
He was the commercial guy for the Velcro.
Oh, I remember now. Yeah, he's always... Well,
He's always in a random spot.
I was gonna say he's always like finding himself on some station for some undisclosed reason, but he wasn't. Well, he was in space, I guess.
Yeah.
So he's just never like in a normal place. He's never like on the crust of the earth.
Yeah.
He's always somewhere else.
Always somewhere else.
Yeah, Mom. Oh yeah, flight went great. I'm on the crust again, so I just think it should be called that. You know what I mean?
Back on the crust.
My father was a miner. He spent years in the dough.
Yeah.
Deep inside.
Well, you know it's not about baking things, right? It's about, like, plate tectonics. So dough doesn't make sense to me.
Peace and love. Okay, peace and love.
Because you'd still be in the crust of the earth if you're mining.
Yeah, I've heard of the earth before.
Okay.
I'm good. I know about the mantle.
It just tripped me up because you would still be in the crust.
I was doing a joke.
The dough becomes the crust.
Okay. I got it eventually, but
Okay,
it did trip me up.
I
So
was
I'm
tracking.
helping the listener.
Okay, I was tracking.
I'm
and
helping
two
the
of us
listener.
here in this room were tracking, and one of us was not. So let's just examine
That's
that
going to
math.
result in an air bump because we were too far away to physically bump.
Yeah. Well, anyways.
After that devastating air bump, Honor
After
has to
that
recover and talk about the plot of this podcast.
Air bump. So the plot of this podcast, it's a little back and forth. Like I said, classic premise. It's the recorded notes of Jamie, who is kind of like, again, vague of who told her to record these notes, but she starts every episode being like, these are the notes of Jamie McGillivray for, I don't even remember the name of the people, but all the time she's like, I don't know if anyone's going to really listen to this. It's never really said what the purpose of the notes is for people to review. Is it for people to check that she's doing work? Is it for people to make note of what she talks about while she's under the sea? Like, what's the point? I don't know. But this is told through the things that she records when she's taking this notes, and then very often when she forgets to turn off her recorder because something comes up.
An interesting plot point.
An interesting plot point needs to be recorded. So she goes under the sea. She's kind of starting to get to know everyone, poking around to try to, like, make friends. A lot of people are not super friendly. The captain is very strict by the book. Not necessarily in a directly hostile way, just as, like, here's what needs to be done, and that's all I really care about. I'm not trying to make small talk, except for when interacting with the doctor, Sydney, who she does actually dislike, and Sydney, they are hostile to everyone. Which is funny for a doctor to be.
Yeah, I think that's almost a trope. Like,
yeah, almost
doctor
a trope.
with bad bedside manner.
Yeah. And then Jack seems like he could be a fun guy to hang out with, but Jamie makes it pretty obvious to start that she's not interested in men, and all he really does for the first several episodes is hit on her in ways that are not fun or exciting or cool or sick.
Yeah.
So that's really all he does, and everyone's like, yeah, he's annoying, but he's keeping the ship all bolted together. And then the other two scientists are also there. So early on, a lot of it is just them interacting and kind of doing some day-to-day stuff, but like being pissy about it.
Yeah.
One of the early episodes, I wish I could remember his name. He's just gonna be the geologist. Actually, Jamie at one point calls him their resident rock star because he likes rocks, so I'll call him the rock star.
Great.
That's who he is.
That's not confusing.
And honestly, he's maybe my favorite character, so I wish I remembered his name. That's just a L on my part. But it's his birthday, and so they're trying to make a cake, but no one knows how to bake, really, except for apparently Jack knows how to bake, but Sydney so badly doesn't want to ask Jack to bake a cake. And so Sydney keeps coming in while Jamie's trying to record notes and being like, but are you sure you don't know how to bake a cake? And Jamie's like, yeah, I don't know how to bake a cake. It's like, okay, if you say so.
They got instructions on the box, man.
Yeah. So then one thing that happens that kind of becomes like, oh, more involved is actually the being in the underwater station part of the plot is Jamie's in her room and she gets really freaked out because she sees a giant eye out her porthole window. It is as big as the porthole. And you kind of wonder, is this going to go in like an Eldritch horror situation? Because that's also pretty common when you do like a submarine or like you're trapped at a space station. There's something out there. It's going to get you. You don't have anywhere to run.
Yeah.
So it's like, is that where we're going? But then she goes and talks to Mona, the biologist scientist, and she's like, oh, that's probably a giant squid, actually. And for a while you are like, is this one of those things where she thinks it's normal, but it's not? But it is. Like, Jamie's really freaked out about it. And she's like, okay, but is that thing normal? Is it a thing that's going to rip the station apart? Is it? And Mona's like, no, that is just, like, the sea's weird, but it's probably just a giant squid. And actually, I'm excited. And I want to see if we can get it to come back so that I can observe it. And so this becomes kind of a recurring theme where Jamie is pretty freaked out by the stuff going on. There starts being these earthquakes that the rockstar scientist guy is like, yeah, we'll batten down the hatches, but these are normal. And she repeatedly is like, but are you sure? And he's like, look, if the station suddenly tumbles off the side of the trench that we're sitting on, do you have anything you can do to prevent that? And she's like, no. And he's like, then I don't know why you're worried about it, because we can't do anything except keep monitoring things like we are and leave if we need to. But if something suddenly happens, that's just gonna happen.
I mean, that is a really normal response, though.
Yeah, very normal response, but he's also like, here's my reassurance. And so there's all these things, and even just the weird fish that Mona is researching, that sometimes Jamie will come into the lab because the Rockstar and Mona are the only, like, pleasant people on this vessel, and so Jamie goes and hangs out with them. But Mona will be, like, looking at fish, and then there's kind of one episode where she ends up kind of showing Jamie what she finds really appealing and beautiful about these specimens, and Jamie has this kind of realization of, like, oh, there are beautiful things in the ocean, and you can definitely tell she's, like, warming up to Mona, too, and Mona's warming up to her. They become close. And then the next sort of plot point is that the earthquakes are getting worse. Power starts to get cut off from the station. There's a lot of things where it's like, okay, you're kind of saying sciencey words that make sense, but I'm not entirely sure this makes sense, like, for real. So there's earthquakes that aren't necessarily putting the stability of the station in danger, but might cut off the power supply. Power ends up going out. They have to go repair something. So Jamie is asked to man the communications for a bit. They get a communication that Mona's father has just passed away. And so then Jamie is like, that's a really rough thing to get. Like, she didn't even know he was in hospice, and Mona didn't even know because she's under the sea. They only brought this message down because she was listed in his next of kin. Yeah. And so Jamie's like, I guess I have to go tell Mona that her father passed away. That's really difficult. And it also starts to connect in with a conversation that they'd kind of had before, but then they talk about more, where part of why Jamie has come down to the bottom of the ocean is because she kept kind of vaguely saying, oh, I just needed a change of pace. It's revealed that, I believe about 6 months prior, like not super long before this, Jamie's wife had passed away. Sure. Like really suddenly in a car accident. And so she was kind of just wandering, lost, had kind of become estranged from her family, and then was like, I guess I'll go to the bottom of the ocean.
Mm-hmm. Okay. How much of the podcast are we through? Where are we headed?
We're through a lot of it.
So there's not going to be an overarching plot here.
No, okay. It's really, like, I was kind of getting through it all to show that a lot of it is kind of just strung together. Like, it's just a bunch of things that are happening. It's kind of hard to find a through point.
You know what it is?
Yeah.
It's not exactly the same, but it sounds like the first season of Wolf 359.
Yeah, they're definitely trying to get their legs under themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah, this becomes a little bit more of a, like, okay, there's a coherent thing coming together. You then realize this is why Jamie's so insistent on her last name being both parts of the hyphenated last name, is because it's, you know, her hyphenated last name with her past wife. So then that's happening. One thing that I did find interesting is that all of the episode descriptions are formatted as these notes that clearly Jamie is writing to someone named Rebecca. Like, the first one is, Rebecca, first day aboard, made nice with the captain and friends with the marine biologist. Might have problems with the doctor. I've been thinking a lot about Vern. You should pull out your copy. I know you have one. It's like, you're not really sure what this is about. It seems to be someone they're familiar with. Signed Love J, so assumedly Jamie. It is then revealed because Jamie ends up kind of going to find Mona a little bit after this news about her father, and she'd been feeling bad about not knowing how to be there for Mona because she didn't really have a great relationship with her parents. And she's like, whenever I'm talking about this parent that passed away, like, I don't have a frame of reference, because if my parents passed away, like, I wouldn't be affected in the same way. And then it's actually Sydney that she talks to, where Sydney's like, you should just tell her that instead of not being there for her because you guys are close. And she's like, you're right. And so she goes and she finds Mona, and she's like, my mother-in-law, who I didn't have a chance to get super close with before my wife passed away, like, came and was a person who was there for me and was really taking care of me after she passed away. And so everyone deserves to have that person. And Rebecca is that mother-in-law who she's writing to. So then it seems kind of out of left field, the last episode.
Okay.
There's this incident where it's the first time we interface with any of the submarines that come and dock at the station. There's a ship that comes in and, like, crashes into the side, like, doesn't dock very well, and then busts into kind of the airlock because they're all sick with the flu and need medical treatment and want medical treatment, but because they harmed the airlock, normally they have things set up because when it's two crews of people who have only been in contact with each other for a while, then if you expose each other to new germs and stuff, everyone can get really sick really quick because of how immune systems are built up and whatnot. And so then they're like, this is damaged, and the captain is pretty much like, we can repair it, but we're not gonna be able to send you medical assistance until we repair this situation so that we can monitor airflow and contamination like we normally do. Everyone else on the crew, however, is like, these people are very sick with the flu. A lot of people don't die from the flu, but sometimes people do, and especially people in strange environments like being under the sea. Mm-hmm. And so Sydney, the doctor, and everyone else are like, we should go help them, even if we might get sick. Let's go help them before they're all too sick for helping. And so they end up sort of busting through. Jamie had been offered a position as kind of an assistant captain to stay longer because she's gotten good at interacting with the other people in this station and stuff. And so she's kind of taken that position and is helping run things that the captain needs, like checking in on everyone, but also is like I do support this, so I didn't hear any of this conversation where you're planning to go behind the captain's back. And then they go help these people, and it's like Jamie and Mona have a nice moment where they're together, and they're like, well, guess we might be about to get sick for a while, and maybe the captain will be mad, but let's see what happens. And then that's the end of the first season. Now, at the end of this, there's sort of an explanation. There's like the credits, there's thanks and acknowledgments, and then there's, we want to do a second season. If you want to support that, you can support our Patreon. Season 2 will be soon, whatever. Season 1 came out in 2017.
Yeah, okay.
So, this feels like it
is not going anywhere. And also, that makes sense because the story isn't going anywhere.
Yeah.
All right, you just recap that. Nothing happens in this show.
No, I really was like, is there a way for me to sum up the plot in a shorter way than just saying events? But it's kind of just events.
I feel like the shortest way you can sum it up is nothing happens.
Yeah, it is kind of like that. There is a little bit of, I think maybe a way to sum it up is that Jamie's working on her sort of quote-unquote research paper. It's more like philosophy about what it's like to live under the sea. And in the second to last episode, she kind of recaps what she has and then is kind of like, I think I might scrap some of this. It doesn't feel like it has a real point that I'm getting to, but I'm going to keep working to find that. And I'm like, that feels like
this podcast.
Wow. I
Yeah.
feel like I'm waiting for Jamie to figure out what the point is. So then I know what the point of the show is. And there's a couple things that kind of start to coalesce, but they don't really come together into a cohesive thing. And I'm like, this is intriguing.
I think I would have boiled up and exploded if I listened to this podcast. But this is so much like Wolf 359. I listened to that podcast. I listened to the first season. I'm like, there's nothing going on here. But of course, at the end of the
there's more.
At the end of the first season, like stuff picks up.
Yeah.
And then there's plot. Wolf 359 still has its problems and parts that I don't like about it. Mm-hmm. But at least like by the end of the show,
yeah,
they're like, we'll do something.
It does have a plot and like some through line themes and kind of doing. Yeah. This one kind of flips back and forth where you're like, I can't quite tell what the point is.
I feel like you might only like this if you're interested in the setting, you know?
Yeah.
Because also, like, what are the, like, it's not even just like a bunch of like little vignettes, you know what I mean? Because is there a theme? Like, is there even, like, I know it's talking about this character's personal experience with loss and with love.
Yeah.
But does it have any, like, does it explore those in an interesting way?
Yeah, not a ton. It's, I don't know.
Would you rate this nothing out of burger?
I don't know, because it's fairly well put together. The voice actors are pretty good. And I'm like, there are kind of interesting things there. There's characters that are likable. They do have a couple points that come together into, like, okay, this relationship with her mother-in-law is interesting and, like, heartfelt. But I would rate this probably a 2.5, maybe a 2.
We're so generous.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. Like I said, there wasn't stuff where I was like, this is really bad. Like, I don't like listening to it. And there's definitely been podcasts where I have not liked listening to them. But I was like, this is a fine, good time. It just, I got to the end and I was like, it didn't come together for me.
Yeah. No, I think you're...
That's how I feel about it.
Much kinder than I would be. I think I would positively die.
Yeah.
And speaking of dying positively...
Are you positively dying
to kill us with good vibes?
Yeah.
Well, okay. So I've been very excited to come talk about this podcast on the Podpodcastcast because I understand you guys have had some correspondence with some Victorian era listeners.
That's true.
A consulting detective.
I listened to the Sherlock Holmes podcast, and then we got, I wouldn't say fan mail. I wouldn't say hate mail either. We got mail. From the famous detective himself.
Yeah. And I just want to say, like, Mr. Holmes, if you're listening, I'm going to do my best to not tarnish your reputation because the podcast that I've brought today is the podcast Sherlock Co, which is produced by Goalhanger Studios, I believe.
Oh my gosh. You know what Goalhanger also produces?
What?
The Rest is History.
Whoa.
Which is a really good podcast. It's a history podcast.
Yippee. This podcast is essentially a modern retelling of Sherlock Holmes. The goal for this podcast is to adapt. I believe there are 60 Sherlock Holmes stories, including the short stories and the novels.
It's a Benedict Cumberbatch situation.
The way that I think about this podcast is it's like the BBC show Sherlock, which is a modern retelling of Sherlock Holmes, but if it was in podcast format and also just better. Sorry, BBC. But essentially, for anyone who has not read the Sherlock Holmes stories by Arthur Conan Doyle, I have read many. I have. Okay. There are a couple of Sherlock Holmes books actually right behind Sam right now, live in studio.
Sherlock Holmes collection.
Patience will downplay her Sherlock Holmes fandom, but she is a real Sherlock Holmes.
Oh, I love Sherlock Holmes.
Interesting. Okay.
So essentially, the format of these books is that they are the written sort of biography or like chronicling of Sherlock Holmes, the detective, and his cases, which are written. The whole gimmick of the stories is that they're supposed to be written by his best friend and his like assistant and partner in crime solving, I guess, Dr. John Watson. And so the format of this podcast is that it is a podcast created by John Watson in like 2022.
No. Is that good or is that like okay?
I think they do it in such a fun way. Okay. Like the show notes, the episode descriptions and everything, like all of them are written in the voice of John Watson. Gotcha. You can email at DocJWatsonMD and like email John Watson. You can
I like that to get the MD in the email address.
There's a whole joke about Sherlock is like, you understand, it's not Doc and MD, like it's one of the, and John's like, I know that, I couldn't get another username on X Sherlock, okay, can you leave me alone? But the whole premise, and then in terms of, the show's writing and production, I think they do a really excellent job of sort of making it that immersive thing where like, the content warnings at the beginning of every episode are John like in his apartment being like, this episode contains shenanigans. I will probably edit that out later. And then Sherlock will like interrupt him and he's like, shut up. Another thing that's really fun about this podcast is the level of fan engagement that they have. Sure. So, at the end of the episode, John will be like, give us a follow on Twitter, X, not Twitter anymore. And then they will actually do like fan shout outs. They will give shout outs to people who have listened and sent in messages and stuff. And like at one point, John, in character or whatever, like they did so many fan shout outs that John Watson missed his train in the podcast. It was so silly. But yeah, so essentially the basic setup here is there is an introduction episode that is sort of the setup. The first Sherlock Holmes story is a novel, A Study in Scarlet, and that is where John Watson meets Sherlock Holmes. They move into 221B Baker Street, and it's like, oh, this guy's a consulting detective. Let's write about it. So we have that sort of setup, establishing these characters and what's going on, and then from there, they go sort of case by case. Each case will generally be 2 to 3 episodes that are like 35 to 45 minutes long-ish. I have looked ahead. There are some. I know they adapted The Sign of the Four, which is the second of the novels, which is where we meet John Watson's wife, Mary, who I love and who the BBC wronged. So I'm very intrigued about what they're going to do with her. That one's a 10-parter. So I'm very intrigued about that.
How much have they done?
So I honestly am not sure. It's still ongoing unless they've managed to finish it in like the last month since I last checked. But yeah, the goal is to adapt all 60, and then I'm not sure what they'll do after that, because then that's all the source material. But yeah, so we have, again, this general setup where we have this introductory episode, and I do like, as I said, I've not read all of the Sherlock Holmes literary canon, but generally, from the ones that I have consumed, they generally will follow the sort of core beats of what's happening in each of the stories. Sure. And then there's obviously, tweaks for a modern setting. And then they also do, I would say, a bit more focus on, the development of these characters themselves, which I think a lot of modern adaptations will go for. I think a big part of the charm of Sherlock Holmes in his day was like he was the master detective. But ultimately, the thing that sells it is the John and Watson character dynamic, which we will for sure be talking about.
So I'm curious, just as to the format of the show. So John is telling these stories, but you said there's also a voice actor for Sherlock. Is like when he gets into the stories, is the voice actor for Sherlock doing Sherlock's lines, or you know what I mean? Or is it all just John narrating?
So
I say John. I should say Watson. I don't know.
Yeah, you and John can be on a first name basis.
Me and John, dude, we toy.
Yeah, John's a colloquial guy. So the setup here is that, or at least in the world of this story, John was not originally the podcast came before Sherlock as far as like events in John Watson's life, because so the general story beats in the Sherlock Holmes narrative are John Watson was a military doctor, was overseas, was injured in combat, and so was sent back to London.
Is this so that this is in the books from Ye Olden Times? Is that the same in the podcast? Like, is
Yes.
Okay.
They follow these general story beats. So John Watson has been injured overseas, has just gotten back to London, and he has decided that he's going to start this podcast about like veterans' lives in London, because he gets back home, he's injured, he's just gone through like a very harrowing and traumatic experience, and he's kind of like, okay, now what? And so he's like, okay, I'm going to start this podcast, I guess. And then he's looking for somewhere to live. John Watson runs into an old friend from school. This is also a beat from the books. And they're like, oh, they're shooting the breeze, they're catching up. And John's like, oh yeah, just trying to find an affordable place to live in London. And his pal's like, oh, you're the second person who said that to me today. And Watson's like,
I like the eyebrow raise you just gave me.
Well, I have to get into character. But Watson's like, oh, who was the first? Smash cut to Mr. Sherlock Holmes. And this is where our next story beat happens, which is where Sherlock Holmes is legally required to have a weird and nerdy scientific entrance into the story, where he's doing some weird science thing. John Watson's like, what is this guy up to? He's like experimenting with blood and hemoglobin. And in this one, it's about like different hormones and like pain receptors and all this stuff. And he's just like, basically, it's like, here's this weird smart guy. He immediately deduces John Watson's entire backstory. He's like, oh yes, you were in this country at this time. Here's exactly what happened to you. And that's why you have that limp in your leg. And you went to medical school, but you didn't finish your medical training. And you're kind of an average doctor, actually. And John Watson's like, so, hey, that's not cool. What?
Also, I don't know if you can be an average doctor and not have finished your medical training. You know what I mean? I feel like that's...
I IDK about that one, honestly. But they end up at 221B Baker Street, the apartment. John Watson's like, okay, I mean, this guy's a little bit weird, but I don't know. This is fine, I guess. Jump cut to them at like John Watson into his microphone at 2 a.m. being like, Sherlock is still awake and he's playing his violin very loudly and aggressively at 3 a.m. And I think there's someone in our living room, so I'm going to go check that out. And it's Barack Obama.
What? Whoa. Is that in
How
the books?
Did he get there?
Barack Obama is in the books. But so the next morning, John is like, hey, Sherlock, why was Barack Obama in our living room? And Sherlock's like, oh, he was thanking me for my services. And John's like, what? What does this mean, Sherlock? And then a cop shows up at the door and Sherlock's like, aha, a job. John's like, what? John's very confused at this point.
Yes.
Poor John. And the cop's like, we have a case for you. And then that is when John is like, oh, this guy's a consulting detective. Interesting. And so then from there, Sherlock is like getting these cases and John's like, well, this is like really interesting stuff. And people like true crime. So like,
oh my God,
if this is going to make us money, then like maybe I should just podcast about this stuff that Sherlock does. And then it gets popular because the actual podcast got popular. And so then John is like, guys, thank you. You gave us this like listener's choice award. That's like really awesome. Thank you guys. And that's the format of this podcast.
I like that it's, I don't even know if meta is the right word.
That fits.
Yeah. The lines are blurred.
Yeah.
Between what's happening in the fiction and in reality.
And I think that they balance it in a really fun way. I will say, I love the voice acting in this podcast. John is played by Paul something that starts with a W. I'm sorry, Paul. But I think that actor does a really great job at, like, John is, especially at the beginning, like, he's very incompetent at hosting a podcast because he's never done it before.
Sure.
And so he's like, hey guys, so I spent a lot of time with the music on this one. I was like, they were playing this music at the store, and I thought, maybe it'd be cool if I so I spent a lot of time like doing the transition music and stuff. And I think it's really cool. So like, I don't know. I hope you guys like it. Oh yeah, there's swearing in this one. There's some F-bombs in this one, so just watch out for that. Like, it's so, and that actor does such a good job of making John just this like
bumbling fool.
Yeah, and so then there's just this whole vibe throughout the podcast that this is like, we're making it up as we go.
So in these stories though, is he like going with Sherlock and recording it as it happens?
Yes.
Or is he recounting? Okay.
And that is an interesting one too, because another one of the things that I think this podcast does really well, ultimately, the cases themselves are interesting and they do a good job of adapting the cases, to a modern format and making them, exciting and like, oh, what's going to happen and all that stuff. But ultimately, I think the reason that Sherlock Holmes has remained so popular is the appeal of Sherlock and Watson as characters and the dynamic that they have.
Yes.
You know, like the Master Detective, there's a lot of those, but there's only, you know, Sherlock and Watson are this like very specific character dynamic that I think the appeal has remained.
And everybody else is trying to emulate.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, but no one is doing it like those two guys. Like, come on. And I think this show, this is where I'll bully the BBC just a little bit, because I think that actually the reason that I found this podcast is I'm about to embarrass myself, but I saw something on Pinterest talking about how the BBC missed the mark on Sherlock's character, because Sherlock is, you know, he's obviously this like extremely highly intelligent, very, you know, like objective and analytically minded person. And then as far as like social and emotional dynamics go, that's one of the areas where he struggles as a character. And I think in a lot of modern adaptations, people take that to make him just like kind of needlessly mean to people.
Sure.
Like they take, you know, he struggles to interact with other people and like understand like people's responses to things on an emotional level, and they take that to mean he's just like needlessly cruel to people.
He's a jerk. He doesn't care. Yeah.
And I think something this podcast does really well, because at first, you know, there are moments where like there's a moment where Sherlock is breaking the news to this woman that her sister has been killed. And it's originally like they thought one of her sisters had died, and then it turned out it was actually the other sister. So he's talking to this woman. He's like, okay, well, I have good news. Your sister Sarah is not dead. And she's like, oh my goodness, thank you so much. That's amazing. He's like, now Mary is dead. So I'm going to work on that. And of course, this one breaks down and is distraught. And John, as a doctor, Leo takes Sherlock aside and he's like, you can't just say that to people. Like he, as the doctor, has sort of this, as opposed to Honor's podcast, this doctor does have good bedside manner. And he's like, Sherlock, like you have to handle, like these are huge moments in people's lives. You can't handle it like that. And Sherlock was like, well, no, but like she did lose one sister, but she also got the news that the other sister was alive. So in my mind, that is not a net loss.
Yeah, right.
And he's like genuinely, he's like, was it what I said, or was it the way I said it, or da-da-da-da? And I think they do a much better job of making it clear that for Sherlock, it's not this like arrogance per se or cruelty. It's that he genuinely like he cares about truth, and he is just like, you know, he's taking in literally everything about the world. You know, he's this extremely observant and perceptive person. And he says at one point, like, I take it all in until I can't anymore. And then like, I have to tell the truth. And I think that they do such a good job of making that clear, as opposed to like, this guy's just a jerk to people for a reason that's never really explained. And then also makes him such an interesting foil to Watson, who is often, you know, 3 steps behind Sherlock when it comes to the deducing and the analyzing. But then he can navigate these other moments with people in a way that Sherlock kind of struggles to at times. And they balance each other in a really interesting way.
Because Watson is much more the common man.
Yeah.
You know? And that's like, he plays the role of the audience.
Right.
Throughout every story is like, I need to explain this to you also. That's also what he provides to Sherlock, the character, is like, you got to know how to be normal.
Yeah. And it's really fun to get to, you know, I think that also is what makes the story so appealing, is that we have Watson like as a representation of the audience. And so we're not alienated by like Sherlock being a genius and we can't keep up with him, because we have Watson like helping us out in a way. You know, he's playing catch up too. And I think they just do a really good job of humanizing both of them in that sense. Like not just Watson, but we also like they humanize Sherlock in really compelling ways, which I enjoy, because I think in terms of any Sherlock adaptation, like your Sherlock is only as strong as your Watson as far as your character writing goes. And I think they did a really great job with Watson, and that then gives us really interesting insight into Sherlock as a character.
Patience, I'm going to ask you for 2 ratings.
Okay.
1, how do you think this rates for the general audience? And 2, how do you think this rates as a Sherlock fan, as someone who's seen a bunch of
Okay.
Yeah.
For a general rating, I am going to give this, I will give it a 4.2 out of 5.
It's a good show.
I really enjoy it. I think they do a great job of making the cases themselves engaging. So like the plot is really exciting, but then if you prefer more character-driven stories, they also have, I think, really well written and really well acted characters. I think there are a couple of little things just in terms of the format of the podcast. There are some certain moments where I'm like, why did John choose to keep this really emotionally vulnerable moment in the final cut? And like most of the time I'm able
to... it'll get clicks.
Literally, like I think there is a time where Sherlock's like, do you want to turn this off? And John's like, no, the listeners, they'll understand.
The listeners.
So there are just occasional moments where that takes me out of it. But honestly, like, I don't think you have to be a Sherlock Holmes fan to really enjoy this podcast. And for me, I just have a grand old time. Like
Awesome.
I give it 221 Bs out of Baker Street.
Whoa.
Wow.
For me personally.
That's a perfect pod. And you know what else is a perfect pod?
This one.
Podcast.
And our inbox at podpodcastcastpod@gmail.com.
Yeah.
We have an email to read off. Thank you for your review, by the way.
Hey, thank you for having me.
I would love to read off this quick email. The subject line of this email is your regrettable recent episode, which could be a response to any episode.
To any of them.
Dear Sam and Honor, how are you? I heard your recent podcast episode featuring my podcast, Good Hang, with me, Amy Poehler. Amy Poehler?
Wow.
I couldn't help but notice that you didn't fully appreciate my extremely good podcast. It was nice to hear you say, quote, if the comedians email in, I'd be so happy, end quote. Well, I talked to the comedians. They said, you'll never sell a dime of PP Heads merch. That seems fair.
Oh.
I wish you all the best. Most sincerely, Amy Poehler. P.S. Just so you know, I couldn't legally sign my name to this email if I wasn't the real Amy Poehler.
And that's true.
That'll
true.
do it.
So this must be the real Amy Poehler.
You guys are really famous.
We're very famous, and I want you to know that exactly 6 minutes later, we received this email from a different email address.
Okay.
Dear Sam and Honor, I believe you may have recently received an email from me, Amy Poehler. Please ignore the sender's email address associated with the prior email. That must have been some sort of Gmail glitch, and I would hate to drag some regular non-podcaster into our little pod tussle. Warm regards, Amy Poehler.
Wow.
It's awesome. This email, and I don't usually read out the email addresses, but I will.
Yeah.
This email was sent from amy.poehler1791@gmail.com. The other one was not.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so that's
interesting.
Excellent. So thank you, Amy Poehler, from emailing in despite this Gmail glitch.
Yeah.
We appreciate your comments, and we'll make a better podcast. I'm sorry, I guess.
Yeah, we'll work on that.
If you would like to give us feedback on the Kurt Santa podcast, you can email it at podpodcastcastpod@gmail.com.
Yeah.
Or you can leave a review wherever you're listening to this podcast. You're on Apple Podcasts, give us 5 stars. We'll read off your little review. Your other places, I don't know what they are, but you should also give us 5 stars there probably. And you know what I would give 5 stars, Honor?
Patience. Review of a podcast.
A wonderful guest.
Thanks, guys.
Patience, thanks for coming on. Thanks for telling us about more Sherlock B. Holmes, as I've been informed his name is.
Yeah.
This sounds fun. I might actually go listen to this one because I really enjoyed the other Sherlock Holmes, surprising amount of Sherlock Holmes podcasts.
Yeah.
And I hope you enjoy Chrisley Confessions 2.0 and Under Pressure, which are the next big podcast.
Yeah.
Oh, of course. That's what they're all saying.
Yeah. 8-year break between season 1 and season 2 of Under Pressure.
You gotta recharge.
Yeah.
And listener, if you want to know what the next big podcast is,
Stay tuned.
Stay tuned to Podpodcastcast. We'll be talking about them all month long. I mean, longer than that. We just come
forever.
We're trapped here. Let us out. But until we're free. Oh, thanks, Honor, for potting with me. Okay, goodbye.
Yes, bye.
It's not quite what our music sounds like.
All right.